The night it all began, the rain started to fall, just as the last song faded into silence. Outside the back exit of the venue, the world felt strangely still, except for the soft patter of water on the pavement. Billie Eilish stood near the alley's edge, her green hoodie soaked and clinging to her shoulders. Her voice had carried through the building minutes earlier, but now she looked small, almost like the girl she used to be before the fame. She wrapped her arms around herself and stared into the distance. Unaware that someone had quietly walked up behind her, Keanu Reeves was never the kind of man to draw attention, especially not in moments like this. He noticed her trembling, the way her body slightly swayed, like the storm had taken more than just her warmth. Without saying anything, he gently removed his black leather jacket, the one with the faint tear near the shoulder from a motorcycle fall years ago. He placed it over her shoulders. "You shouldn't be cold like this," he said softly, his voice blending into the rain. Billie looked up, surprised. Her lips parted, but no words came. She took in his calm eyes, the way he didn't expect anything in return. Then she nodded once, slowly, and pulled the jacket tighter around her. "Thank you," she finally whispered. They stood in silence for a few moments, not as celebrities, not as icons. Just as two people sharing a quiet, wet night outside a crowded world. She didn't tell him about the phone call she got before the show, the one that shook her more than she showed on stage. Her childhood friend Mia had been in a car accident. Critical condition, unconscious. Doctors weren't sure if she'd make it through the night. Billie hadn't had time to cry. Not in front of cameras, not with thousands of fans screaming her name, but here in the cold and dark, she finally let one tear fall. Keanu didn't ask. He didn't pry. He simply stayed by her side, silent and steady, like a lighthouse in a storm, hours earlier. The night had started like any other. People had lined up outside the arena by noon. Fans wore neon green wigs, black hoodies, and glitter. Girl in the front row held a sign that said, "You saved me when no one else could." That wasn't rare. Billie had a way of reaching the broken-hearted, the forgotten. She sang for those who felt too much. Inside, the stage lights flickered, the crowd cheered, the drums pounded through the floor. And yet, through it all, Billie's smile never fully reached her eyes that evening. The weight of that phone call never left her chest. She didn't want to cancel the show. She knew the fans needed this night. But something inside her kept slipping. Between songs, her voice cracked. Her fingers trembled when she adjusted her mic still. She sang. Every note, every line. Every heartbeat. Keanu had been invited by a mutual friend. He wasn't even sure he would attend, but something told him to go. He had always admired Billie's courage, the way she moved through the noise of the world with her own rhythm. When he saw her perform, even he, someone who had lived through storms of his own, felt the emotion behind each lyric. When the show ended, he didn't rush out like the others. Something in her final words, the way her voice dropped as she said, "Thank you for being here tonight," made him pause. He waited by the exit, unnoticed by most, until she came out, and now here they were, two strangers known by the world. But alone in their own thoughts, standing in a rainy alley. "This is your jacket," Billie said again, after some time. She looked at him, her voice steadier now. "You don't have to give it up." "I can get another," Keanu replied with a soft shrug. "But maybe you needed it more than I did tonight." Her fingers moved to the edge of the leather, smelled like wind and old stories. "Maybe?" she said. They both knew she wasn't just talking about the jacket. The next day, Billie didn't tell anyone about what happened in the alley. She just folded the jacket carefully and placed it in her bag. Later that afternoon, she flew to her hometown to visit Mia in the hospital. Doctor said there was a slight improvement. Not much, but enough to give hope. As she sat by Mia's bedside, she reached into her bag and pulled out the jacket. She remembered how safe it felt, how quiet the world became when someone offered kindness with no reason at all. She gently placed it over Mia's frail body. "Someone gave me this when I needed strength," she whispered. "Maybe now it's your turn." In that moment, something, shifted not in a loud, dramatic way, but in the kind of way that echoes. Mia's fingers moved just a little. The monitor stayed steady, and Billie smiled for the first time in 2 days. She didn't text Keanu, didn't post about it, but somewhere deep inside, she knew this act of kindness wasn't just a moment. It was a thread, one that might stretch further than either of them could imagine. And as the sun began to rise, lighting the sky outside the hospital window, Billie stayed right there, holding her friend's hand, the jacket still resting across her chest like a silent promise. A jacket, a memory, a Miraclethi hospital room, smelled like soft antiseptic and fresh flowers. Sunlight spilled through the blinds, lighting the pale blue walls in gold. Billie sat in the corner chair, her hoodie pulled low over her head, eyes fixed on the rhythm of the heart monitor beside Mia's bed. The slow beeps were steady, like a lullaby fighting to stay alive. The jacket, Keanu's jacket, rested across Mia's small body. It looked oversized, a bit strange on her thin frame. But Billie couldn't bring herself to remove it. She felt like it held something more than warmth, something real, something healing. Nurses came in and out, quietly adjusting machines and taking notes. None of them asked about the jacket, and Billie didn't explain. 3 days passed. Billie barely slept. She didn't go online. She didn't check her messages. She just stayed. Her team kept her schedule clear. Fans wondered why she had suddenly gone silent. Headlines speculated everything from burnout to secret projects. Didn't care. Not now. Not while Mia's hand was still cold, and her eyelids still refused to move. On the third evening, a nurse named Karen paused beside her. "You look exhausted," Karen said kindly. "Want me to bring you some coffee?" "I'm okay." But she wasn't. Her chest felt tight, like she'd been holding her breath for days. And just as she was about to break, Mia's finger twitched again more than before. Billie jumped to her feet. "Mia," she whispered. There was no answer, but the twitch happened again. And again, within minutes, doctors filled the room. Checked her vitals, repeated her name, examined her pupils. One of them finally turned to Billie and said, "She's responding. We still have to wait, but this is a very good sign." Billie stepped back and stared at the jacket. She didn't believe in magic. Not really, but this felt like something more than coincidence. Meanwhile, in another part of the city, Keanu sat quietly in his backyard, sipping tea under the soft night sky. He hadn't heard from Billie, and he hadn't expected to. His gesture wasn't about that. Didn't even remember it until a text from his assistant came in. "Some fans online think you were at Billie Eilish's concert. True?" He smiled, and put the phone down. He liked that it had stayed quiet. Not everything needed to be posted. Some things were better left untouched. Keanu had always believed that kindness wasn't meant for credit. It was meant for connection. He didn't know what had happened after he gave away that old jacket. He didn't know about the hospital, the coma, the miracle. Not yet, but somewhere deep inside. He had a feeling the moment meant more than either of them could see. The next morning, Billie woke up with her head against the bed. Mia's hand was wrapped in hers. Something felt different. She opened her eyes and sat up fast. Mia's eyes were open, barely, but open. Billie gasped. "Mia." Mia blinked slowly, confused. Her lips moved, but no sound came out. Still, her eyes were there. "Alive?" Billie single quotes. Tears came fast. A doctor rushed in. More nurses followed. It was real. She was awake, and the jacket still covered her like a second skin later that day. After everything had settled, Billie stepped out into the garden behind the hospital. She finally took a deep breath. Fresh air, sunlight, life, and her phone buzzed. It was a message from Keanu, only one line. "I hope you found comfort in the jacket." Billie stared at it and typed back slowly. "I did, but it did more than comfort me. It helped wake someone up." She hit send. And for the first time in days, she smiled, not the tired kind, but one that came from somewhere deep inside. 2 days later, Billie visited a nearby coffee shop she and Mia used to go to back in the day. She needed a moment to feel normal, too. Remember things outside the hospital walls. As she stood in line, someone tapped her on the shoulder. "I love your music," said a young girl, maybe 17, with red eyes and nervous hands. Your songs helped me when I thought I couldn't go on. Billie nodded softly. Thank you. That means a lot. The girl looked down, then whispered, My brother passed away last week. I came here because he used to bring me. Here when I was sad, I didn't know I'd see you. Something in her voice was cracked and breaking. Billie reached into her bag without thinking. She pulled out the jacket. This isn't just a jacket, she said quietly. Someone gave it to me when I needed strength. I gave it to someone else, and now I want you to have it. The girl's eyes went wide. I can't. You can, Billie said. And when you feel stronger, maybe you'll know who to give it to next. She wrapped the jacket around the girl's shoulders, just like Keanu had done for her, and walked away. The stranger and the rain returned 3 nights later. Not a storm, not thunder or flashing skies, just a soft, steady drizzle that made the streets glow under the yellow lamps. In a quiet neighborhood, far from the arenas and flashing cameras. The girl Billie had given the jacket to her name was Emily sat on a bench outside an empty bus stop. The jacket was still wrapped tightly around her. It was slightly big, smelled of leather and something like old memories, and it made her feel less invisible. Emily had spent the last week barely getting out of bed. Her brother's funeral had left a hole in her chest so wide that even breathing hurt. She hadn't planned on going out that night. But something pulled her into the world. She didn't know where she was going. She just knew she needed air, and now here she sat. No umbrella, no phone, just a jacket and her thoughts. Then she saw him, a man standing across the street, soaked to the bone. He looked rough, scruffy beard, sunken cheeks, tired eyes. He was staring at the closed bakery window like he hadn't eaten in days. Emily hesitated. Part of her wanted to walk away. It wasn't safe to approach strangers at night. But the jacket was warm. So was the memory of what Billie had said. Someone gave it to me when I needed strength. She stood up slowly, crossed the street, and stopped a few feet from the man. Are you okay? She asked quietly. He looked at her, surprised. I'm fine, he lied. She hesitated, then slowly took off the jacket. You look cold, she said. Here, he shook his head. I can't take that. It's not just a jacket, Emily replied, repeating the words Billie had once spoken. It's something more. Someone gave it to me, and now I think you need it more than I do. Stared at her, unsure what to say. She gently placed the jacket around his shoulders, then turned and walked away before he could stop her. He stood there for a long time, still and silent, as the rain soaked through everything but the warmth of that one jacket. Meanwhile, back in Los Angeles, Billie sat in her quiet studio, writing in a journal she never showed anyone. The headlines were still buzzing about her sudden break, her canceled interviews, her disappearance, but none of that mattered now. Mia was awake. Still weak, but talking, remembering, and smiling. The first thing Mia asked was, Where's that jacket from? Billie had smiled. It came from someone who believes in giving more than taking. Keanu, too, had felt something shift. He hadn't spoken to Billie since their short message exchange, yet he kept thinking about the night. He gave her that jacket. It had been a small moment. It's barely a few minutes. But somehow, he knew it had grown into something much bigger. He was sitting in a quiet bookstore when a young woman approached him, someone he didn't know. I just wanted to thank you, she said, for something you probably don't even remember. Keanu looked up. What do you mean? You gave a jacket to Billie Eilish, who gave it to someone else, who gave it to a girl named Emily, who gave it to a man I know. That jacket ended up saving him. Keanu blinked. How? He's my father. He's been homeless for 6 months. That night in the rain, he told me he was about to give up. He didn't think anyone cared anymore. But then this girl gave him a jacket hand. He said it reminded him he was still human. Keanu didn't know what to say. The woman placed a small note in his hand and walked away. He opened it slowly. It said, Kindness doesn't end, it echoes that night. Keanu sat alone under the stars, holding that note in his hand. He thought of the jacket, and he smiled. Back in that small town, the man who received the jacket, his name was Ralph, used it to get through the next 2 nights. It kept him dry. It kept him warm. More importantly, it reminded him of something he had almost forgotten. Hope Ralph found his way to a local shelter. The volunteers helped him get cleaned up. One of them offered him a job at a nearby community kitchen. He hadn't worked in months, but he said yes, because of a jacket, because someone saw him, and because someone cared. Meanwhile, Emily went back to the coffee shop where she'd first seen Billy. The barista smiled at her. "You look lighter," he said. "I think I gave something away that made me stronger," she replied. He nodded, not fully understanding, but sensing the truth in her voice. The hands that healed it had been 3 weeks since the jacket. First changed hands in that quiet alley behind the concert hall, and now, in a small clinic on the edge of the city, Ralph stood quietly in front of a mirror. He wore clean jeans, a simple gray shirt, and his hair had been trimmed by one of the volunteers. He barely recognized himself. The man who once slept under bridges, forgotten and hungry, now looked human again. "You ready?" the clinic director, Melanie, asked with a kind smile. Ralph nodded slowly. "Yeah, I think I am." He followed her into the kitchen. It was busy. Pots clanged, water ran, people laughed gently as they chopped vegetables, and prepared trays for the shelter guests. Ralph was given an apron and a towel. "Start with the dishes," Melanie said. "It's honest work," Ralph smiled. "I like honest work." He didn't tell anyone about the jacket. He didn't need to. But it was still with him in spirit, in memory, in strength. That one act of kindness had pulled him out of the darkest place. And now, all he wanted to do was give back. Miles away, Billie Eilish was back on stage. It wasn't a massive stadium show. This time, she had chosen a smaller venue, more intimate, more honest. Something in her had shifted since Mia's recovery. She didn't want the lights and explosions. She wanted truth. Between songs, she paused. The crowd was silent. "Waiting. I want to tell you all something," she said, her voice soft but steady. "Sometimes the biggest changes come from the smallest moments. Sometimes a jacket can save a life." Some fans smiled, others looked confused. But Billie didn't explain further. She didn't have to. She could feel it in the room, in the air. The ripple had already begun. Meanwhile, Ralph's days at the kitchen passed quietly but beautifully. He washed dishes, mopped floors, served meals, listened to stories. He met a woman named Rosen, another volunteer, who had once lost her daughter to addiction. She now dedicated her time to helping others heal. They spoke during breaks, often without needing many words. One afternoon, she gave Ralph a small notepad and a pencil. "You have a voice," she said. "Write something, even if it's just for you." Ralph stared at the blank page that night in his small shelter room. He hadn't written anything in years, but the words came slowly. "Honestly, a stranger once gave me warmth. I wore it like armor. Now I walk with it inside me." He didn't sign it. Just left the page pinned to the shelter's bulletin board. The next morning, it was gone. Someone had taken it. Emily, the girl who gave Ralph the jacket, had returned to her routine. School, music practice, therapy sessions. Grief still lived inside her, but it no longer controlled her. One day, while walking home, she passed a man handing out food to people on the street. She stopped. It was Ralph. He didn't see her, but she watched him for a long moment. His face was calm, peaceful, full of purpose. She smiled and whispered, "I guess it worked." Keanu Reeves sat in a modest diner on the other side of town. His movie shoot had wrapped early, and he didn't want to be surrounded by cameras or interviews. He just wanted to sit and think. A waitress came by with coffee. "You look familiar," she said. "Are you?" Keanu smiled gently. "Probably not. Just someone passing through." She didn't push. Before she left, she placed a small napkin beside his cup. On it was a quote, "Kindness doesn't end, it goes." He stared at the words. He had seen them before. It was the note that girl gave him at the bookstore. He looked around. The waitress was serving someone else now, not even looking his way. He folded the napkin and placed it in his coat pocket. Back at the community kitchen, Ralph sat outside on a bench during break. The sky above was orange and pink. The wind was cool. He had just handed a sandwich to a man who reminded him of himself. Not long ago, that man had looked at Ralph and said, "Thank you, no one ever sees me." Ralph had answered, "I used to feel that way too, but someone once saw me." Didn't mention the jacket, but he thought of it every day. Voices in the silence. Ralph's note, the one he pinned to the shelter board, had not disappeared by accident. It had been carefully taken by a young boy named Daniel. Daniel was 14, tall for his age, and carried silence like it was a second skin. He had been in and out of foster homes for years. It's quiet, too angry, too broken, they said. No one wanted to hear his story anymore. He had come to the shelter that night just for warmth, just for food. But when he read Ralph's note, something shifted inside him. A stranger once gave me warmth. Wore it like armor. Now I walk with it inside me. Daniel folded the paper and placed it in his backpack like it was treasure. And for the first time in weeks, he didn't feel invisible. The next night, returned. Not just to eat, but to help. He found Ralph in the kitchen, handing out meals, laughing with volunteers. And he waited until the line slowed. "Did you write this?" Daniel asked, holding out the crumpled note. Ralph looked at it, then nodded. "Yeah, I did." Daniel stared at him, then said quietly, "Thank you." Ralph tilted his head. "For what?" "For showing me that not all broken things stay broken." Ralph didn't speak, simply placed a gentle hand on Daniel's shoulder. "You want to help me with dishes?" Daniel nodded, and just like that, something new began, back in Los Angeles. Billie Eilish visited Mia again. The hospital had released her, and now she was staying in a small rehabilitation house just outside the city. She was walking slowly, regaining strength day by day. "You've changed," Mia said one afternoon as they sat on the porch. "How?" "You smile more. It's different now." Billie looked up at the sky. I think giving away the jacket made me see something." "What?" "That healing doesn't happen alone. It happens when we help someone else, and then they help someone else. It keeps moving." Mia nodded. Double quotes. "I want to write a song about it," Billie continued. "But it's not really about me. It's about a jacket, a stranger, and a ripple that keeps going." Emily, now carrying no jacket but a fuller heart, found herself volunteering. At a youth center nearby, she'd started playing music again, something she'd given up after her brother's death. One day, she brought her guitar and sang a song she had written. It was about losing and finding again, about strangers who leave light behind. A small group listened quietly. One of them, a young girl named Zoe, came up to her afterward. "Your song, it made me feel less scared." Emily smiled. "Music does that sometimes." "You're not a teacher here, are you?" "No, just someone who was hurting, and then someone helped me. Now I want to help back." Zoe nodded. "I think I want to write a song too." "You should." And so the ripple grew again. Ralph's friendship with Daniel deepened. They worked together in the kitchen, talked quietly during breaks. Ralph began teaching him how to write short poems. Daniel started leaving small pieces of paper on the shelter board lines about stars and shadows and second chances. One night, Ralph handed Daniel something wrapped in a paper bag. "What's this?" Daniel asked. "A jacket," Ralph said, with a smile. "Not the same one, but it's warm. And one day, you'll know who to give it to." Daniel nodded slowly. "You think it'll help them too?" "I think it already has," Ralph answered. Keanu Reeves, unaware of each detail, felt something pull at him. He had been reading more letters sent by fans, stories of hope, pain, and survival. One envelope stood out. It had no return address. Just a note inside: "Your jacket saved more than one life. Thank you for not walking away that night." He didn't recognize the handwriting, but it didn't matter. He knew the truth of it. Billie was finally ready to sing her new song. She walked on stage alone. No band, no lights. Just her and a single spotlight. "This one's for the stranger who gave me something when I didn't know I needed it," she said. The song was slow, haunting, beautiful. It told the story of a jacket passed from hand to hand, of voices that trembled and hearts that healed. of a silence that spoke louder than any applause. And in the crowd, people wept, not because of fame, not because of Billie, but because they saw themselves in the journey. The last threadmints passed. The city changed its colors from gray to golden as the seasons turned. The story of the jacket never made the news, never went viral, and yet it spread in quiet. Invisible ways like wind moving through trees, unseen but deeply felt, Keanu Reeves walked through a quiet street in New York, wearing a simple black coat, blending in as he always did. He passed a mural painted on the side of a community center. It showed a jacket, nothing flashy, just a jacket draped over two hands. Underneath it, painted in soft white letters, were the words, "Kindness is a thread that never tears." I stopped for a long time. A woman pushing a stroller noticed him and smiled. "Beautiful, isn't it?" She said. "Yeah," Keanu replied. "Do you know who painted it?" "Kid who volunteers here. Says he was inspired by a story someone told him. Something about a jacket that saved a life." Keanu nodded, quietly moved. The woman tilted her head. "You look like someone who's lived that kind of story." "Maybe I have," he said, smiling at the same time. Ralph stood at a podium in a small hall packed with community workers, youth mentors, and local volunteers. He was nervous. It was his first time speaking in front of a crowd since everything changed. Daniel sat in the front row, watching him with quiet pride. Ralph cleared his throat. "I was once a man who believed no one saw me," he began. "I slept on sidewalks. I lost my family, my hope, my voice." He paused, his eyes misting. "Then someone gave me a jacket, a few chuckles, some confused glances. Not just a jacket. It was a message. It said, 'You matter.' And because of that, I found the strength to stand up again. And now, I'm here to remind someone else that they matter too." The room went silent. No applause yet, just emotion. And then slowly people stood, clapped, not loud, but long. Ralph didn't cry, but he felt something warm move through him. Like the last bit of winter finally leaving, Emily was now writing music full-time. One of her songs, "In Your Hands," was quietly going viral online. It didn't have flashy production or heavy beats, just a soft melody and honest lyrics. It told a story of a gift passed between strangers, a kind of warmth that couldn't be seen, only felt. One morning, she received a message from someone she didn't know. "I heard your song. I was going to give up today, but I didn't. Thank you." Emily closed her laptop and whispered, "Thank you, Billie." And Billie Eilish? She returned to the same alley behind the venue where it all began. This time, she was alone. No rain. Number. Jacket, just her. She sat on the same bench and closed her eyes. She remembered the weight of the jacket on her shoulders, the sound of Keanu's voice, the silence that followed, the way her world had shifted with one small, quiet act of compassion. She pulled a small notebook from her bag and began to write. Not lyrics, not a poem, just this. It started with a jacket. It was about the choice to care. She tore the page out and taped it to the alley wall. Then she stood, smiled at the sky, and walked away. That same night, a teenage girl named Hannah found herself sitting in that alley, crying softly. Her parents had kicked her out. She had nowhere to go, no one to call. She saw the note on the wall, read it once, and again it was never about the jacket. It was about the choice to care. She didn't understand what it meant at first, but she felt it. As she stood up, wiping her tears, she whispered, "Maybe someone still will." And with that, the ripple began again.